Welcome to the automation course. In today's tutorial, we will be looking at PLC timer and counter operations. So in the bit operations, in discrete operations, we have different categories. We have logic operations, but we also have counters and timers and counters. We will be looking at those. So we'll start off with the T-on timer. So the T-on timer, in order to evaluate timers, we need to look at something called a timing diagram. So this is the timing diagram on this side. This is the block diagram of the timing diagram of the T-on timer. So let's look at what are the inputs and outputs. What are the interface? The in is called the input. PT is called preset time. Q is the output. ET is called elapsed time. So let's take a look at how the timer works. Before we do that, we'll take a look at the actual implementation of a timer. So in order to implement a timer, we would put a start button connected to the in. We would put a time. In this case, it's 10 seconds, and the output would be connected. We'd also link the timer, the Q output of the timer, that'll be a contact, and that'll be connected to the light. So what'll happen here is that when I press on the start button and hold on to it, the timer should go on for 10 seconds. Once that's done, this will close and the light will go on. So let's take a look at the timing diagram for it. So when I press on the button of the start button, this means it goes on. It will start the elapsed time. So this is the elapsed time. It'll go on for 10 seconds. Once it goes on for 10 seconds, the output will go from off to on. The output will stay on as long as you're still pressing on the timer. You're still pressing on the button, on the start button for the input. You'll notice here, we'll take this example here. If I press on the button and release it, what'll happen is the timer will never reach the 10 seconds, so it will never go on. The next timer that we want to look at is the T-off timer. In the T-off timer, we have the same thing. An input, preset time, Q is an output, ET is an elapsed time. So here the T-off timer works a little differently in that you don't need to hold on to the start button in order to make it work. So here we press on the start button, we hold it, and when release. The moment the start button gets released, the timer starts working. But the moment I press on the start button, the output is on. The moment it gets released, the timer works, and once it reaches its time of 10 seconds, the output goes off. So this is the T-off timer. So you can implement the T-on timer, T-off timer the same way. All you need is a start button, a time, the output of the timer, which is Q, and a light. Next, we'll look at an up counter. An up counter is called CTU. CTU has what's the interface? So this is count up, R is reset, PV is present preset value, Q is output, and CV is current value. So let's look at how a setup of a CV would be. So I have the counter, I have a start button that will count, I have a reset button that will reset my counter, and I have a preset value of 5. So this is my Q output. The output out of my counter will be connected to my light. So let's take a look at the way it works. In this case, I've set my preset value to 3. So I need to create, first I hit the reset button that resets my output to 0. And it resets my current value to 0. So I have to press 3 counts, 1, 2, 3. And the moment I press on my third count, the output will go on. In order for my output to go off, I would have to press on the reset button. The same thing applies for my down counter, except it would be count down. Instead of a reset, it would be load, preset value, Q is output, C is current value. In this case, before I start, rather than putting on the reset, I need to load. So it'll take my preset value and load my preset value, which is a value of 3. I would have 3 pulses, and after 3 pulses, my output will go on. My output will go off as soon as I load a new value. And this is the way to make it work. So let's look at an example that we'll be doing. So we're going to be building this counter, this timer, this T-on timer, and this up counter. We're going to be building this. So we'll do that, and we're just going to split the screen. So here I'm in my window of my CodeSys, so which I'm going to build. So I'm going to start off by doing File, New Project, Standard Project. I'm going to put it on my desktop, and I'm going to call it PLC timers and counters. Click OK. So I'm going to leave it to the default. CodeSys Control Win version 3 and ladder logic. So I'm going to click on PLC PRG. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put in the start button, but before I do that, I just got to make sure that the comments are also shown. So I'm going to go to Tools, Options, FBD, the editor, and make sure you have Show Symbol Comment. So I'm going to put in a start button. So I come over here and I put in a normally open contact. I'm going to call it start. And it'll be linked to I0.0. Next, I'm going to come over here. I'm going to put in the timer block. So here, this is the timer block. Look at standard, look at timers, and I'm going to pick the T-on timer. The T-on timer, I'm going to call it timer 1. Enter. And that'll be okay, timer 1. Here, I'm going to put in my time. T number sign 10s, which is 10 seconds. And here I'm going to put in a variable called elapsed time, so that'll be ET1. Enter. I'm going to add a network below. In the network below, I'm going to put in a normally open contact. My normally open contact will be called timer 1. I'm going to put in dots, and I'm going to select the Q output and press enter. Next, I'm going to connect it to here. I'm going to connect it to a pilot light. So I'm just going to make this a little bigger. So here would be my pilot light. So I'm putting in a coil, and I'll call it pilot light. And my comment would be it's at address Q0.0. So let me just expand on this. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to put it into simulation mode. I'm going to build. So I have 0 errors, 0 warnings. Now I'm going to log in. So this means I'm going to download to a virtual PLC. And finally, I'm going to start. So what'll happen is I'm going to go to come to start here, click on it. So what I want to do is I want to enable this switch, which is the start switch. The timer should start to work. The elapsed time should go from 0 to 10 seconds. Once it reaches 10 seconds, this timer contact will close and it will energize this coil, and this coil will enable the pilot light, turn on the pilot light. So we're going to do that. So I'm going to force the value. You'll notice the elapsed time is changing. 4 seconds. It'll go all the way to 10 seconds. Once the 10 seconds is on, the pilot light turns on. So that is part of the, that's how the timer works. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to do a counter. So I'm just going to stop this. And I'm going to log out. Now I'm going to start editing this. I'll come back here and insert network below. I'm going to add a contact. So if you look at if you look here, I need a contact called count. I need a contact, normally open contact, which is reset. and this is connected to my counter up counter. So here I'm going to add a normally open contact. I'm going to call it count. And I'm going to go to the address of I0.1. Next, I'm going to add my counter. So this is a block. I'm going to go to my counter, and I'm going to put in the up counter. Go back. So this is my up counter. I'm going to double click. I'm going to call this counter 1. Click OK. Now I'm going to put in a reset button. That'll be at address I0.2. Finally, I'm going to put in a preset value, and I'm going to put in a value of 5. And finally, I'm going to put in the current value of the counter being CV1, a variable called CV1. Now I'm going to add a second, just going to close the top window. I'm going to add another network below. Here in the network, I'm going to put a contact, normally open contact, and this will be called counter 1 dot, and I'm going to pick the Q output. Enter. And finally, I'm going to connect it to another second pilot light. So it'll go to a coil, and I'm going to put in pilot light 2, and the output will be Q0.1. Just going to change this one to pilot light 1. Q0.0. So now I have my timer ladder and I have my counter. So let me just go and start to rebuild. You'll notice 0 errors, 0 warnings. My simulation is on. I'm going to go to login. Log in with online changes, yes. And here what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start. Just going to reset it that it goes back to its, so I'm going to start over here. I'm going to leave it this. I need this window on top. So here what I need is, if I look at my, so what I need is I need to press first in order to start the the counter, I press on the reset. So I come over here to this reset, click on it, press true, and then I do Control F7 in order to write. So then I put it back to false. Control F7. So I've reset the counter. Next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn the count on and off. So I'm going to come over here. So I want to go to count. Go to true, Control F7. You'll notice that my counter value goes to 1. I bring it to false again, Control F7, and I keep doing that. So now my counter value is 4. What should happen on the next one? When I hit 5, a counter value of 5, my output should go on here, and my pilot light 2 should also go on. So on the 5th count, my counter contact goes on, and my pilot light goes on. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to reset the values. In order to reset this count value, what I have to press on the reset button. So now I can start the timer again. Sorry, now I can start the counter again. So I've demonstrated the use of the timer, which is the T-on timer, and the counter, which is the CTU, the up counter. This ends the lesson on PLC, timers, and counters. Thank you for listening.